While we're getting started, my name is Kate Ray and I'm from ADICAS. So as part of the work that we do as advocates, it's our 25th year anniversary this year. We've been doing advocacy for 25 years in the ACT. There's some familiar faces in the room. We have also been doing some supported decision making work, and that's been my great privilege over the last 4 years. At the moment we're doing a project called Link and Learn, and what I'm bringing you today is a tiny piece of the work that we're doing with families, with decision makers, with service providers, with all kinds of people in the community about supported decision making. The model of supported decision making that ADICAS has really works around the notion that there's a role for everyone. It doesn't matter how much support we give to one individual who might need some decision support. If they go to the GP and the GP doesn't recognise their capacity to decide, they're not going to get to. So we're really working very broadly across the community. So yeah, I'm just going to leap in and get started. Now, usually when we do the couple of we're going to do this a little bit differently today. I'm not just going to speak at you. I'd like this to be interactive. So, but what I'm going to ask you to do is to come and go from the activities as quickly as you can, because otherwise we'll spend time talking with each other and we won't get through what we need to get through. So I want to, a couple of things I didn't do. I want to acknowledge Imagine More. I certainly want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I want to acknowledge our funders for the Link and Learn project, which is the Disability ACT and the NDIS. And all of you for coming. So please feel free to ask any questions. There are no silly questions. Supported decision making is a really massive topic. It's not well defined yet. So yeah, please feel free to ask any questions. I want to get a sense today too, we could take this in a couple of directions. I want to get a sense, how well do people feel they know about supported decision making? So, you know, is it very well, a little bit, or none at all? None at all. Okay. So if I said to you, how well do you think you know where supported decision making might sit within the NDIS? Okay, fantastic. That's great. If you want me to stay in a certain place, there's nothing that says that I have to get through all the slides in this pack. I'm happy to share all the slides. If you want to, we can stay in one certain place and talk about that. And indeed, I'd rather people walked out feeling that you'd done that than having to stay in the one place. So let's get started. The very first thing I'm going to get you to do, I'm going to be really mean and a taskmaster and just give you 2 minutes to take the pieces of paper on the table in front of you, and on each piece of paper I want you to write a decision. It might be a decision you've already made, it might be a decision you're about to make, it might be a decision you'd like to make and you're procrastinating around. I want you to, however you write it, be very mindful of your privacy, because your neighbour might see that decision. So really just think about how you write it. And the other thing I want you to do, the first decision I want you to write is just one you make every day without thinking. Yeah, just a quick one. It's your coffee, it's what you're going to wear, it's, I don't know, just those quick decisions that you make every day. Would anyone like a hand to write decisions down? I should have asked that to start with. Okay. The next decision I want you to make is a bigger one. And by a big decision, I might be one that's hard to undo if things go wrong, or just you have more emotional investment in it, or it might have risks that are more likely to happen. It might just be really complex. It might just have lots and lots of parts. It might not have any risk at all, but my goodness, it has lots and lots of parts. And then the last decision I want you to make is just any other one that matters to you.
So the second decision is what?
Just a big decision.
Oh, big decision.
Yeah, just a big decision. Okay. Just any decision that matters to you.
There's one per page.
Yes, please. Any decision that matters to you. So if you had to make or have made that decision, What do you have to do to make it? Just yell out. You have to think about. What are the things you have to think about? Resources. Did someone say possibilities available?
Consequence.
Yeah.
When you say resources, you mean funding?
Yep.
Financial?
Yep, so they might be financial, they might be time, they might be human, they might be skills. What's available? Someone else said? What else do you have to do?
Consequences on those around you.
Yeah, other people in your decision?
Morals, costs.
Costs, and someone said morals. So there, because it's really hard to make a decision that doesn't fit well with your values, isn't it? It feels very uncomfortable. So morals and your ethics and your values. Safety. Yep. So safety, you might put in a basket of risks as well.
Even like pleasure, what you want.
Nice. What is it I want? So there's goals, and maybe the pleasure stuff comes into the good things and bad things. So it's your pros and your cons. What else do you need to do?
Consider the outcome.
Yeah, think about the outcome. So we could go on and do this, and indeed if you're going back to a circle of support or a family or a service, you're very welcome to do this activity with them. It's really good to get as many things on this list as possible. But the point is that decision making is really quite complex, but if you start to break it down, it gets a bit easier. So think about that big decision in front of you. You don't just kind of decide. You actually, through your life, have been taught to break that decision into parts, and you fairly automatically explore all those parts. Okay, so you never just make one big decision in one place. The other point I want to make just here is that if we all had the same decision to make in front of us, we would all make it in a different way. We all make our decisions differently, and the psychology and neurology around decision making is changing dramatically at the moment. And there's a lot to say that while we value logical and reasonable decision making, in fact, neurology shows that most of our decisions are made on an emotional basis. Yeah, and I certainly know I do that. I do a great list of pros and cons, but I always end up trusting my gut. But my gut's not just this random thing, it's actually the sum of my experiences, of my values, of my ethics. Yeah, so I trust my gut, and I'll put gut up here too. Okay, so the next question I'm going to ask you is if you think about those decisions, does anyone actually, how many of your decisions, if you think about those decisions in front of you, your big ones and your little ones, how many do you make on your own? How often do you actually turn around to someone and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying these shoes, what it is that I want for lunch, I don't know what to wear today, gee, we're about to do our mortgage, not quite sure what to do here. Do you ever do that on your own? Not normally. The point is, the thing that we don't have on this list yet, but is the normal way of making decisions, is that we talk to someone. This is true across cultures. Who we talk to might be different, and it might be culturally dictated to us, but we always talk to someone, almost always. So supported decision making is really just formalising that or acknowledging that. And where people might have a decision making disability, it's actually about just making sure that they've got someone in their life to do this process with in the same way that other people do. Okay? If you think about the people you talk to when you make a decision, what is it exactly that who are the people that you talk to? What are their qualities? What are the things you seek out in them? Why do you talk to those people?
Trust.
You trust them, yeah? They're trustworthy. Yeah.
Honesty.
They're experienced. They have expertise.
They're loyal.
Yet they're loyal, yep.
Honesty.
They're honest, yep.
Similar values.
That similar value system, yeah. Is it that they have no vested interest or that they acknowledge? Who said vested interest? That's a good one.
There's not a conflict, is there?
They will often own their vested interest, I think. Most of us will say, look, I realise that I think blah, but perhaps for you it's blah, blah. You know, they're people that will own their vested interest. So just, and I think that's part of it, honesty and trust, but acknowledge vested interest. Absolutely. Don't decide for you. They're good listeners.
Common sense.
Yep. Do all of them?
The ones I trained on.
Because I also have a friend that I go to for advice because she's the opposite of that, because she's incredibly creative and ambitious and she thinks of these things that don't even occur to me in my really practical juggling work and through motherhood and, you know, and through kids kind of way. So common sense is good, but sometimes we want people because they're creative.
I was going to say, have a different perspective.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question I'm going to ask you is this one. So the point is here that the people that we talk to, there's one thing that they're always not. While we might seek out different qualities and different qualities for different decisions, the person I talk to about my financial decisions, they have common sense and they have expertise. But the person I actually talk to perhaps about my personal relationships or what I'm going to do, you know, my next work move is probably the person that's a bit more creative and ambitious and thinks outside the box. So we seek out different people for different decisions at different times in our life, yeah? But the thing that, if you think, the people that you, when you're seeking people out, the one thing they're not is they're not coercive, okay? They see you for who you are. They're willing to see you for where you're at and what you're doing, rather than coercing you into doing something for a specific reason or because they think it's the right thing, yeah? Unless, as somebody said to me the other day, I actually have a friend who I talk to because I know she'll talk me into the handbag or the frivolous thing that I know I shouldn't do, but really I can sometimes. And I think that's fine too, but somewhere in your head you know that that's what you're seeking. Okay, the very last question I'm going to ask you is this one. When you talk to someone about making decisions, what is it that you're seeking from them? What is it that you want? Like, why do we all do it? Yeah?
Approval.
Approval, agree, affirmed. Sometimes it's to be challenged as well. So we could go on, we won't because we don't have time. But I think the point, what we've actually done right here is you've just made a map of your own supported decisions. So I could give you 101 definitions of what supported decision making is, but I think this one's a sensational one. There's a couple of reasons. I want to make 3 points. You've actually just identified, and my apology, my purple pen seems to have slipped out of my kit today, but you've actually just made you've just made a map of what I think what supported decision making is. You've broken down the decisions in a decision into parts. Yeah, and they're all parts that in different ways and for different people can be supported. We can support people to explore options, to explore consequences, to explore safety and risk and safeguarding. We can help someone to break down a decision into the time that's available and timing and skills. We've also seen in this what it is that we want from the people who support our decision making. And indeed this needs to be, I think, a bit of a litmus of how we give support in our own life. Yeah? Is this the way I treat other people in my life? And am I treating a person with a decision making disability to approach decision making in the same way as all other people? I think this is a really important litmus to be using. And then that third one is those supports that we're seeking, whether it's to be challenged or to be validated or a whole lot of places in the middle. We're seeking support to better understand our future and to better understand what's available to us at a certain time. Okay, so just hold on to your decisions. We haven't given up on those pink ones yet. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, I really want to quickly go over, give you a description, because if you want to be doing this work, you kind of need to be able to say what it is. If you Google support decision making, there's a lot of academic work, there's a lot of discussion about legal capacity as being part of support decision making, which it is, but it's perhaps not very practical, theoretically important, but not necessarily practical. I love this. So supported decision making happens when one person gives another person the support they need to participate in decision making. So it supports legal decision making. Supported decision making in Australia is becoming an alternative to guardianship. That's what it means by legal decision making. In the ACT, we've got a report pending around adults making decisions in the ACT, and it will, because it's fulfilling human rights obligations, be moving the ACT into a human rights framework, and that mirrors other jurisdictions in Australia and around the world. So this is the future of where decision making is going. So that's the legal stuff, and then the day-to-day decision making. Okay, so day-to-day decision making is really, really important. We get lots of good stuff from those day-to-day decisions, and we'll get into that in a second. But I like this definition. So if you're supporting decision making, you're supporting someone, you're just giving them the support they need to make a decision. And it's whether it's big or small, you're breaking it down at a rate that's appropriate to the person, you're giving them information in a way that they can understand it, you're making sure that they've got options that are relevant to them, that they like. Yeah, so it's really about supporting a person to approach decision making. So that's the first thing. The second,
With that, being a mother of a child with disability,
Yep.
am I doing that every day?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I think the challenges perhaps from the research come when somebody is older, and when enabling someone to actually be able to step out from that mother-parent relationship, because right now it's appropriate as a parent to be making lots of decisions for your kids, but as we know that as people with disability get older, when it becomes harder for them to establish that identity as a decision maker and to actually have that as a valid social role and part of their life. And we know that when people don't step into that part of their life, that they actually end up being more vulnerable. And we'll get into that in a second. You know, the things that, there's a great saying, and it says the more you love your decisions, the less other people have to love them. So if you're able to say, you know what, I did it with support, but I know why I made this decision, and I know what my values were, and I know the options. You know, different language, I'm not saying that someone's going to say it like that, but can at least tell you how they got to where they went and why they got it, and why, you know, what the risks were, what they were willing to lose, what they did to safeguard themselves. They're going to be much less vulnerable to somebody coming in and saying, you need this, I will decide for you. Yeah, so, yeah, but we'll get into that. So next one is supported, so point 2. So the first point is just having that simple definition. The second thing I hope you'll take away is just that recognition that we all do it. This is the normal way of decision making, and this is about bringing that norm into people's lives as much as we can. And the last point I want you to make here is this is not something that has to be incredibly formalised. It can be really formal. You can have a formal decision supporter or supporters. You can have a supported decision-making agreement. But it doesn't have to be like that. It can be a very informal process. And the great thing about that notion that supported decision making is the norm, that you already have experience of this. You already know what it feels like to be supported. Every time you ask your mum or your sister or your husband or your co-worker about a decision you're making, you're getting that experience of what it feels like to be decision supported. And you also know what it feels like to give support. So you've got experience of this. It's just how we roll it into the lives of people who have a disability that impairs their decision making. So how does it work? So in the past, decision making capacity was kind of understood as, you know, something you either had it or you didn't. But that's not really true. If you're in my house before I've had a coffee and a shower, my decision-making capacity is very impaired. I can't do it then. I can't engage it. I'm not awake enough. I'm not ready. My brain's not in the place to do it. So for all people, decision-making capacity exists on a spectrum. The spectrum's time-specific. Some people are better in the morning. Some people are better in the afternoon. The spectrum's also decision-specific. There are some decisions that we can make in a snap, even complex ones. There are some decisions, if you see people walking around a food court at lunchtime, it's not that hard. A hard one to make though, for a whole lot of reasons. You're tired, you're hungry, you know, whatever it is, you're wanting something more than food out of your food. but your decision making is impaired. So what is happening increasingly in policy and in law is that we're catching up to the notion that impaired decision making, we all have decision making on a spectrum, and in fact where we sit on that spectrum, and this is true for all people, depends on the support we get to make decisions. Yeah? So it's much more about the support we're given to make a decision. So what's external, the relationships we have, rather than what's going on in our head. Okay? So, on that spectrum, and I'll give you an example really quickly. So I've got two people who are at the moment who are in our Lincoln Learn supported decision making project. One of them has, and they both have fairly impaired decision making capacity for very different reasons. One of them has a guardian who is allowed to make decisions, who's been appointed to make decisions about her accommodation. She's got some pretty strong ideas about what she wants and what she doesn't want, but her guardian doesn't agree with those things. And her guardian, as her decision maker, has just made a decision about what her life is going to look like once her disability ACT house ends, which it will because it's block funded. She's not very happy about that, and she's very worried about what's going to happen because she's actually she has some real concerns that she feels haven't been aired around what that's going to look like. I have someone else who has a psychosocial disability, and if you talk to him about the NDIS, he'll walk out of the room because it's just too overwhelming. If you talk to him about his home, he has an absolutely fixed belief that his uncle won the lotto, his uncle bought the house for him, and he and his mate are going to stay there forever. And I get why. He's lived in big institutions for a long time, and he's finally living in a really great house with two guys he likes. This is new for him. But you can't ask him. If I walk in and say, so, where are you going to live after September? He will get up and leave. He won't participate in that discussion, either because you mentioned the NDIS or because he says he's not going anywhere because he has an absolutely unmoving belief that his uncle owns the house and it's his to stay in forever. So what do we do to support him? He won't participate supposedly. What do we do? Well, it's about asking different questions. It's about acknowledging that fixed belief impairs his capacity to make that decision. So my job is to be a bit creative in how we engage him in that decision. And he absolutely has been engaged. So Dave, I noticed that every time I come here, you're actually sitting outside. What's that about? Is it because you like being in the sun, or you don't like being inside, or what is it that you're seeking? It's quiet, it's loud, you like the birds, whatever it is. So those conversations about what home means to him, we're not even talking about moving. We're actually just finding out about what he values in his home and what home looks like for him. And we'll continue to have conversations, but we will build a picture of that. So ultimately, his guardian will have to make that final legal part of the decision about where he goes. But at least they can make it, having taken into account all of his will and preference, what it is that he wants. And in fact, the ACT Guardianship and Management of Property Act actually allows for that. It actually says that that's what a guardian's supposed to do. So on that spectrum, the idea is that if you were to use a supported decision-making process, it would, at the very worst case scenario, inform a substitute decision-making process, because you found out what it is the person wants, so therefore you're being least restrictive. And if I think about those two decision makers, how tied they are to the outcome at the end, and how satisfied they are, and how connected they are to a good life is going to be very, very different. Yeah, one of them already doesn't want to go. The other one's already thinking about, wow, these are the things I love about my home, and at least we'll have a baseline to start to talk about those when it comes time to move. So in that, and again, this is consistent with most guardianship frameworks in Australia, which are changing anyway, but and certainly the new ACT Mental Health Care and Treatment Act, this is where legislation is going. So a substitute decision can only be made when all the support options have been exhausted. So we're not saying, support decision making is saying that there's never a need for substitute decision making. What it's saying is that you're engaging a person as far as they can, to be as self-determined as they can, as often as possible. Okay? What I want you to do now, just really quickly, because we're running out of time, is to pick up your 3 decisions, fold them over, turn to the person next to you, And I want you to do this without talking, okay? I want you to be reflective in this. And so I want you to offer up your 3 decisions to the person next to you, and they get to take one away from you. I know that there are people in the room who don't need to imagine what this feels like, because I know there are people in the room who've had decisions taken away. So please, if that distresses you, please don't do it. I now want you to, so someone gets to take a decision away from you. I want you to look at your remaining decisions. Have a think about what it is you've lost. Yeah? Just get someone to take a decision away from you. Doesn't matter who takes it. Yeah. I want you to stop. No, I want you to look at your own decisions. Have a look at what you've just lost. I want you to reflect on what you've just lost. You've just lost the ability or the capacity or the right to make a decision. It might be a big one, it might be a small one, it might be a random one. But I want you to tell me how that makes you feel. Yep. Yep. Okay.
Reverberates in other parts of my life.
Just one at a time, please, people.
Like it reverberates. Like mine was choosing which school my daughter goes to.
Yeah.
But that just reverberates. Like that's my fatherhood. That's my future of my child. And there's so many different areas.
So it just feels bigger than, just one at a time, please, everyone. It feels bigger than just the decision you're talking, just one decision. Okay. I want you to turn around now very quickly.
Sorry, can I add?
Of course.
Because it's a very different perspective. I'm interested in your
Yeah.
view. Is the decision that got taken away from me.
Yeah.
While all of those things are true, I'm also very grateful because it's a decision
Great.
that I've been trying to make for a couple of years and just can't.
And did anyone, and thank you for bringing that, did anyone feel relief? So, yeah, great. That's good. And they're all fantastic things to feel.
Like, what's new?
It might be possibilities for you.
No, what's new? Decisions get taken away all the time.
Yeah, here we go again. Okay, I want you to turn to the, actually we won't, we're going to do this quickly. If you're doing this with another group, you're very welcome to take these activities and do them with someone else. If you are, what I would get you to do now is one at a time lose your decisions, okay? And what actually ends up happening is that while sometimes you might feel grateful or relieved for losing a decision, once you start to lose all your decisions, that really starts to impact you, yeah? And these feelings become angry, really actually turns to something much greater than that for most people, and we'll get, frustration, isolated, completely disempowered. What I want you to do is, really quickly, because Heidi's here, because we've only got 5 minutes left to go, and I've still got plenty of slides I could show you, is I want you to turn to the person next to you and give them their decision back. I don't want you to talk. I want you to tell me how you feel. How are you feeling to have your decision? You're overwhelmed. But could they now support you to make that decision? Because they kind of know about it. So this person's now in a person to support you to make that decision rather than making it for you potentially. So sometimes we need to take decision making away from people to keep them safe, because they really are incredibly vulnerable and can't make a decision. However, the words on this side of the page are not words I associate with being safe. So these ones are, these ones aren't. Okay, if we went through this, you might, there are other words we would add here, but so the trick is, when it comes to decision making and substitute decision making and supported decision making, is to make sure when there's a need to make a decision on somebody's behalf, that it's as informed as possible by the person's will and preference. That's the first thing. And that the time that lasts for lasts as short a time as possible, so that you're able to come back to someone and say, You know, okay, we have to do this now, but you're checking back and finding out what it is you need to do to make sure that that substitute decision making lasts as for the shortest possible time. Yeah? Okay, I'm going to race through. How many minutes have I got, Heidi?
4 or 5.
4 or 5, fantastic. So, I just want to go from extending from that exercise that supported decision making, the small decisions matter. Sometimes I've got a colleague who, when he did this exercise, he lost his coffee, and it really mattered to him because he was new to Australia and his coffee choice was a flat white, and he saw flat white as being the Australian coffee, and therefore he was doing more than just buying a coffee in the morning. He was being part of community. Through small decisions, we express really important things, even things like what we wear. None of us likes going out of the house dressed in clothes that aren't ours, that don't fit us, yeah? So it's really important to explore small decisions as well as the big ones. And some of the participants in our supported decision-making project, the first and most important decision has been a decision around what they wear or what they eat. And what they eat, what people eat, is a really big issue, especially when you're living in a shared living environment. That's a really important one. Okay, so I'm going to skip over this, but you need to know supported decision making is a human right, and you can do it with support. So this supported decision making, the move into a supported decision making framework, is about fulfilling our human rights obligations under the CRPD. So at the moment, if somebody has a physical disability, we would build a wheelchair ramp, right? We don't say you can't come here, you can't participate because you have a physical disability. We build wheelchair ramps. We need to start to see supported decision making, less visible, but just as necessary in people's lived experience of a good life, of how they access things, as that same wheelchair ramp. It's absolutely a tool for choice and control and access and participation. Supported decision making true is certainly here in the ACT. It's absolutely embedded in our new mental health framework. It's coming in the guardianship framework, and it's sitting in the NDIS. Choice and control is about making decisions about your supports and services. More than that, it's actually making decisions about what your good life is, so that you can use supports and services to create that good life. Yeah. So I'm just going to go through really quickly. There's a lot of emphasis in the NDIS on the pathway, and it's about kind of, setting your goals. Once you've got access, setting your goals, and then being able to create a plan and review a plan. That's enormous for someone who hasn't had the chance to, choose what they're having for dinner. Yeah. So we really need to make sure that when we do this, we're breaking down what goals are, what decision making is, and how they do it. So these slides will be available to you. There certainly is, I've put this stuff in just because I think it's really important if you're planning with people to know that this is actually in the NDIS legislation. It assumes people have capacity to decide with support if they need it. Yeah? Okay? We're not suggesting that everyone could just walk in and do this. What this is about, supporting a person to participate as far as they are able. Yeah? So what I'm going to do just really quickly is we see 5 key areas of decision support. And if anyone was in Janet's session next door, I think that notion of building a person's expectation and identity as a decision maker, that's a valid social role, is a really important thing to start thinking about. Incredibly important. How much your decisions define who you are, but also how other people see you. If you're not seen as someone who's able to make decisions, it becomes really, really hard to be seen as someone who has a valid role in our community. Now, so learning about decision making a decision. So the NDIS tends to concentrate on that, on the make decision, but I think these first 2 steps, there's a lot of stuff in there that people need to go through. So I've given you, I made a quick list about what you might need to do to think about to support a decision if you were making a home about your decision about your family. But it just kept going on. It goes beyond the end of this slide. So I started to break it into little groups. So I will finish on time, honey. To make a decision about my home. So I might need to support to know where decisions, that I have a decision to make in the first place, that I actually can make this decision and I have a right to do so, and I have a right to do so with support. I might need some support to get support in my life, and that's a really big challenge if people are socially isolated. If you're working in a circle of support, can you just check with the person they actually want the circle to be who supports decision making for them? Because I've got 2 people at the moment who are in the Link and Learn project, and that's not what they want. So it's been set up and well-intentioned by a service provider, but they don't want that support from that circle. So really important to ask the person, who do you want to support them, and finding the right person, and also think about what supports might be helpful. If someone hasn't had support to make decisions before, they're going to need a bit of support to maybe explore what supports they need. So then there's a whole lot of things, thinking about your life now and your past experiences. These are really hard things to do. They sit in here and in here and in here to actually work out what it is your goals are. Yeah, because so that you can make your plan as meaningful to you and what you want as you can. The thing I'm going to quickly touch on, and I'm happy to ask questions when we go outside, is about when supported decision making is done well. I think it's a really great mechanism to hear and be heard. So to really make sure that people in the decision maker's life understand what they want, but also in the other way. So it's kind of, there's a rights and responsibilities. And we need to understand how our decisions impact others. But we also need to recognise that we all make decisions that somebody else doesn't necessarily agree with. And it's about how informed we are in doing that and understanding it. So good decision support is very circular, I think. The other really big one is around risks and consequences and safeguards. And if people are living in the ACT, you're very welcome to, we run regular workshops around supported decision making, and you're very welcome to become part of those. Compromise in group environments is another big thing that we do lots of things. So that last one is also to weigh up a decision. But then there's how many people do you know? And I know there's people in their room who would say that this is a part of what happens to them, is they make a really good decision, but they depend on other people to perhaps make sure those decisions actually happen. So it's part of supported, and so nothing happens and you end up in limbo. So part of supported decision making is making sure that the person has a plan to fulfill their decision and making sure other people respect their decision. Okay. This is the very last thing. So 5 key things. So there's five key things I want you to take home from this, is that everyone has rights when it comes to decision makers. So decision making. The question is am I, or the person who's in my life who's going through the NDIS, really using their right to exercise choice and control? Do they know that they can have support to make decisions or exercise choice and control? That decision-making capacity exists on a spectrum. So are they exercising choice and control as far as they are able? Is their will and preference informing it? If you're not the decision maker, so being really clear about what your role is in supporting this decision. Is it supporting it? Is it finding a supporter? Is it helping make sure the person's being heard? There's lots of different roles. This is a very diffuse process. And the very last one, Heidi, is decision making should always be supported. So has this person been given as much support as they need to exercise choice and control in the NDIS? So if